The sound starts before dawn, a rhythmic hammering, metal on metal. Springfield Armory, Massachusetts, 1918. Inside a cold workshop, a man named John Browning stands over a machine gun, the Browning M 1917. Water-cooled, belt-fed, .30 caliber. It fires. It works. But Browning knows it's not enough. The war in Europe is eating men. The trenches demand more firepower, heavier caliber, longer range. The Army wants a machine gun that can punch through steel at 1,000 yards. Browning has an answer. The .50 caliber. Twice the projectile weight. 3 times the muzzle energy. A round designed to kill engines, not just men. He scales up his .30 caliber design, makes everything bigger, heavier bolt, stronger receiver, thicker barrel. The first test firing is in 1918, October, 3 weeks before the armistice. The gun works for about 20 rounds. Then it jams. They clear it. Fire again. It jams. The problem is simple. The cartridge is enormous. When the bolt slams forward, the round doesn't feed cleanly. It catches on the edge of the chamber, tilts, stops. Browning adjusts the feed mechanism. Tests again. It jams. He changes the angle of the feedway. It jams. He modifies the bolt face. It jams. The armistice comes in November. The war ends. The .50 caliber project continues, but slower now, less urgent. The Army still wants the gun, but there's no battlefield demanding it. For 3 years, Browning works on the feeding problem. He tries dozens of solutions, different feed ramps, different extractor designs, different timing sequences. Nothing works consistently. The gun will fire a few hundred rounds, then jam, or it fires perfectly for a week, then fails in the cold, or it works with one batch of ammunition and fails with another. By 1921, the Army is losing patience. They've invested years. They've spent thousands of dollars. They need a gun that works. Other designers are proposing alternatives, competing designs. The .50 caliber project is in danger of cancellation. Browning knows he's missing something, some small detail, some aspect of the physics he hasn't considered. He's 66 years old. He's designed more firearms than any man alive. Pistols, rifles, shotguns, machine guns. Most of them work flawlessly, but the .50 caliber eludes him. His team at Springfield works through the winter of 1921. They test in freezing conditions, in heat, with dirty ammunition, with pristine ammunition. The results are inconsistent. Sometimes the gun fires 1,000 rounds. Sometimes it jams after 50. There's no pattern, no predictable failure mode. Then a man named Samuel Green walks into the workshop. It's February 1922, a Tuesday morning. Green isn't supposed to be there. The machine gun workshop is restricted, but he knows one of the machinists. He asks to see the .50 caliber. Green isn't a gunsmith. He isn't an engineer. He's a mechanic from the Springfield Armory motor pool. He fixes trucks, mostly Ford Model Ts, Army transports. But he's been watching the .50 caliber tests from across the yard. He's heard the frustration. He's seen the engineers shaking their heads. And he has an idea. Browning is tired. He's tried everything. He listens because he has nothing to lose. Green's idea sounds absurd. He wants to cut a notch into the cartridge case, a small groove just below the neck, a place for the extractor to grip. Browning explains that the extractor already grips the rim. That's how rimmed cartridges work. The .50 caliber round has a thick rim. It doesn't need another gripping point. Green nods. He understands. But he insists the problem isn't about gripping strength. It's about rotation. He explains that when the bolt drives the cartridge forward, the round doesn't travel in a straight line. It rotates slightly. The base of the cartridge drags on the feed lips. The nose tips upward. By the time it reaches the chamber, the angle is wrong. The extractor, gripping only the rim, can't control this rotation. It's pulling from a single point at the base of the cartridge. The round pivots around that point. But a groove below the neck would give the extractor a second point of contact. 2 points of contact means the round stays level. It can't rotate. Browning listens. He's skeptical. The explanation seems too simple. If the problem were rotation, his years of experience should have revealed it, but Green is insistent. He draws a diagram on a piece of paper, shows the cartridge feeding, shows how it tilts. Browning looks at the drawing. He thinks about the failures, the way the cartridge sometimes enters the chamber cleanly, the way it sometimes catches. Maybe. He orders a batch of modified cartridges. The machinists are doubtful. They don't believe a truck mechanic has solved what Browning couldn't, but they follow orders. They machine a shallow groove into each case, just forward of the extractor rim, 3 millimeters wide, 1 millimeter deep. It takes a week to prepare 50 rounds. The work is delicate. Cut too deep and the case will rupture. Too shallow and the extractor won't seat. The test is scheduled for a cold morning in February 1922. The 23rd. The temperature is below freezing, the same conditions where the gun usually fails. Browning loads the modified ammunition, charges the weapon, fires. The gun runs through all 50 rounds without stopping. No one speaks. They load another belt. Standard ammunition, unmodified. It jams on the 14th round. They clear it, load the modified ammunition again. It fires. Another belt. It fires. Another. It fires. They fire 1,000 rounds that day. No jams. Browning examines the modified cartridges under magnification. The groove is barely visible. A small channel, 3 millimeters wide, cut into the brass. But it changes everything. The extractor now contacts the cartridge at 2 points, the rim and the groove. This dual contact keeps the round level as it feeds. The nose enters the chamber at the correct angle every time. The bolt closes smoothly, every time. The team runs more tests. They fire in heat, in cold, with dirty ammunition, with the gun uncleaned for days. It works. The modification is adopted immediately. The cartridge is redesignated. 50 caliber BMG, Browning machine gun, but it should have been called the Green modification. Samuel Green, the truck mechanic who saw what the engineers missed. Green is 42 years old. He's worked at Springfield Armory for 8 years. Before that, he was a machinist in a textile mill. He has an 8th grade education. He doesn't publish papers. He doesn't give lectures. He just fixes things. By 1923, the M2 Browning enters service. It will become the longest-serving machine gun in American history. Still in use today, more than a century later. The 50 caliber BMG cartridge becomes standard, not just in machine guns, in sniper rifles, in aircraft weapons, in vehicle-mounted systems. The first combat use comes in 1927. Marines in Nicaragua, mounted on a vehicle, used against fortified positions. It works. By the 1930s, every branch wants them. The Army mounts them on tanks. The Navy puts them on ships. The Army Air Corps installs them in bombers. The Boeing B-17 carries 13 50 caliber machine guns. 8 of them are M2 Brownings. Each one depends on Samuel Green's groove. World War II begins. Production accelerates. By 1945, the United States has manufactured 2 million M2 Brownings. Billions of cartridges are produced. Every single one carries the modification, the small groove that makes them feed. Factories in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania. Women working lathes. Cutting the groove. Thousands per day. Most don't know why the groove is there. They just know it's part of the specification. The cartridge drawing shows it clearly. Groove depth, 1 millimeter. Groove width, 3 millimeters. Location, 12 millimeters from base. But the drawing doesn't say who designed it. Green receives no recognition. His name doesn't appear in the official development records. The patent lists only Browning. This is common. Patent law in the 1920s favors the project leader, the man who files the paperwork. Browning receives credit for the entire weapon system. Green's contribution is considered a minor modification, not worthy of separate recognition. Green doesn't fight it. He goes back to the motor pool. He fixes trucks until he retires in 1935. He's proud of his work. He tells a few people about the .50 caliber, his family, some friends. But he doesn't make a fuss. He dies in 1944. His obituary in the Springfield newspaper is 3 sentences long. It mentions his work at the armory. It doesn't mention the .50 caliber, but his solution remains. World War II, the Pacific Theater. A Marine gunner named Robert Wade mans an M2 Browning on Guadalcanal. It's August 1942. The Japanese are attacking at night. Wade's position is on the perimeter. He fires 3,000 rounds that night. The gun never jams. He doesn't know about Samuel Green, doesn't know about the groove. He just knows the gun works. It saves his life. Europe, a bomber crew over Germany. Their waist gunner fires at attacking fighters. The .50 caliber works in freezing conditions at 20,000 feet. The crew survives. They don't know about the groove. Korea, Vietnam, the same gun, the same cartridge. A Marine in Vietnam carries an M2 through the jungle, mounted on a riverboat. It fires in humidity that rusts everything. It works. The Gulf War. M2 Brownings mounted on Humvees, firing in desert sand. It works. Iraq, Afghanistan, the same gun, 100 years old. Still working. Engineers study the .50 caliber for decades, trying to understand why it's so reliable. They examine the chamber dimensions, the bolt timing, the gas system, the recoil mechanism. Most never notice the groove. It's too small, too simple. They assume it's just part of the standard cartridge design, not a modification, not a solution to a problem. Just the way the cartridge is. But machinists know, ammunition manufacturers know. Anyone who has to cut that groove into millions of cases knows. It's not decorative. It's not accidental. It's the reason the gun works. Remove the groove and the .50 caliber becomes what it was in 1918, a promising design that jams. The modification costs almost nothing, a few seconds of machining per cartridge, a fraction of a cent. But it's the difference between a weapon that works and a weapon that doesn't. In 1995, a military historian named David Carter finds a memo in the Springfield Armory archives. He's researching the development of the M2 Browning, going through boxes of old documents. Most are technical drawings, test reports, procurement records. But one memo stands out. Dated March 1922, written by a lieutenant named James Morrison. It mentions Samuel Green by name. It describes his contribution. It recommends a commendation. Carter reads it 3 times. He's never heard of Samuel Green. The name doesn't appear in any published history of the M2 Browning. He searches for more documents, finds nothing. He checks personnel records, finds Green's employment file. Motor pool mechanic, hired 1914, retired 1935. No mention of the .50 caliber. Carter searches for the commendation. There's no record of it being issued. He writes an article. It appears in a small journal. The Journal of Military Firearms History. Circulation, about 800. A few people read it. Samuel Green's grandson sees the article. Someone mails him a copy. His name is Michael Green. He's 70 years old, living in Vermont. He never knew his grandfather worked on the .50 caliber. He thought he just fixed trucks. Michael reads the article twice. His grandfather died when he was 8 years old. He remembers a quiet man, someone who could fix anything. But he never talked about the war work. Michael calls David Carter. They talk for an hour. Michael has a few photographs. His grandfather in his 20s, in his work clothes, standing next to a truck. None show him in the machine gun workshop. Michael asks if there's any way to get recognition for his grandfather. Carter says he'll try. He contacts the Army. The Springfield Armory is no longer an active arsenal. It's a museum now. He asks if they'll create a display about Samuel Green. They say they'll consider it. Nothing happens. Carter writes more articles, gives a few lectures. The story spreads slowly through the firearms community. Some people are skeptical. They say there's not enough documentation. One memo isn't proof. Others believe it. It makes sense. The modification is too specific to be accidental. The debate continues for years. In 2003, another document surfaces, a handwritten note from John Browning, found in a private collection. It mentions green. The mechanic's solution to the feeding problem proved correct. It's dated March 1922. The note is authenticated. The debate ends. Samuel Green modified the .50 caliber cartridge. His solution made the M2 Browning possible. But still, no monument, no display, no formal recognition. The family has no photographs of Samuel Green at work, no letters describing the modification. Just a few stories passed down. A man who was good with his hands, who understood how things moved. The Springfield Armory Museum has no portrait of him, no exhibit. The workshops where he worked were torn down in 1968. But the groove remains. Every .50 caliber cartridge made today carries his solution. Every M2 Browning, from Alaska to Afghanistan, depends on those 3 millimeters of missing brass. Current production is about 50 million rounds per year, civilian and military combined. Each one requires the groove. The gun itself is famous, celebrated. There are museums dedicated to John Browning, documentaries, books, biographies. His face is known. His story is taught. Samuel Green is a footnote, when he's mentioned at all. But soldiers who depend on the M2 are depending on him. Pilots who fired .50s in World War II depended on him. Gunners in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan depended on him. They never knew his name. Most people who study firearms don't know his name. But the modification endures. Cut into billions of cartridges, invisible to most, essential to all. In 2015, a Special Forces team in Syria uses an M2 Browning, mounted on a vehicle, supporting an operation against ISIS. The gun fires flawlessly. The team completes the mission. They clean the weapon afterward, standard procedure. One of them examines a spent cartridge, notices the groove. He's never thought about it before. He asks the armorer what it's for. The armorer doesn't know, says it's just part of the design. The soldier throws the case away. Somewhere in Vermont, Michael Green is 88 years old. He still has the photographs of his grandfather, the article from 1995, the memo from 1922. He keeps them in a folder, shows them to his grandchildren sometimes. They're proud, but they don't really understand. How can a groove in a cartridge matter that much? Michael tries to explain. About feeding angles, about rotation, about how the smallest things can change everything. They nod, but they don't quite get it. That's okay. Michael understands. His grandfather would have understood too. Sometimes the most important solutions are the smallest ones, the ones that seem too simple to matter, the ones proposed by people who aren't supposed to have the answers. A truck mechanic looks at a feeding problem and sees rotation. He suggests a groove. And a century of warfare changes. No ceremony, no recognition, just a small modification that makes an impossible gun possible. The M2 Browning will likely serve for another generation, maybe longer. The military has tried to replace it. New designs, modern materials, advanced engineering. None are significantly better. The M2 still works. Every round it fires will carry Samuel Green's contribution. His name should be on every cartridge. It isn't, but the groove is there. 3 millimeters wide, 1 millimeter deep, cut into the brass. The difference between a gun that jams and a gun that doesn't. The difference between a failed design and a legendary weapon. The difference between soldiers coming home and soldiers dying. Proposed by a man who fixed trucks and understood how things should move. In the Springfield Armory Museum, there's a display about the M2 Browning. It shows the gun's history, its service record, the wars it fought. There's a photograph of John Browning, a technical drawing of the weapon, a timeline of its development. In small text near the bottom, there's a sentence. The cartridge feeding problem was solved in 1922 through a modification to the case design. No name, no details, just a sentence. Most visitors don't read it. They look at the gun. Marvel at its age, its longevity. They don't think about the groove, but it's there, in every cartridge, in every gun. Samuel Green's solution, anonymous, essential, forgotten. The workshop where he proposed the modification no longer exists. The building was demolished. A parking lot stands there now, but the idea survives, cut into metal, repeated billions of times. A small groove, 3 millimeters wide, the mark of a man who saw what others missed, who spoke when he wasn't supposed to, who solved what couldn't be solved. And then went back to fixing trucks.